Chaos erupted at Union Station in Washington, D.C. yesterday when thousands of pro-Palestine protesters gathered to condemn Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address to Congress. Now, at one point, protesters painted a, quote, "Hamas is coming" on the Columbus Fountain and wrote Gaza slogans on the Liberty Bell. They also took down an American flag, replaced it with the Palestinian flag, and then burned the American flag. Let's watch. Clashes broke out between demonstrators. Law enforcement also used pepper spray at times and did arrest at least 23 demonstrators after the chaos. A group of Republican lawmakers went to Union Station subsequently to raise the American flag. Here's Representative Mike Collins along with House Speaker Mike Johnson.
Hey, listen, Mike Collins, we just got through voting not too long ago, and I'm standing here with the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Earlier today, this is where they took down the flags. We're at Union Station now. They took down the American flags and hoisted up the Palestinian flag and actually burned our American flag just about 20 yards from us here. So we decided that we would come to Union Station tonight, hoist the American flags back up there, which is what we did. There's a couple of things you need to realize. Number one, this is the United States of America. Don't come here and don't take down our flags. Number two, we're going to stand with Israel 100%, always.
It wasn't just Republicans condemning the actions at the Union Station. Vice President Kamala Harris released a statement this morning saying, quote, "Yesterday at Union Station, Washington, D.C., we saw despicable acts by unpatriotic protesters and dangerous, hate-fueled rhetoric. I condemn any individuals associating with the brutal terrorist organization Hamas, which has vowed to annihilate the state of Israel and kill Jews. Pro-Hamas graffiti and rhetoric is abhorrent. We must not tolerate it in our nation. I condemn the burning of the American flag. It should never be desecrated in that way. I support the right to peacefully protest, but let's be clear, anti-Semitism, hate, and violence of any kind have no place in our nation." House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries also released a statement this morning saying, quote, "Defacing public property, desecrating the American flag, threatening Jews with violence, and promoting terrorist groups like Hamas is not acceptable under any circumstance."
Senator Jackie Rosen similarly tweeted, quote, "The glorification of Hamas, a terrorist organization backed by the Iranian regime and holding over 100 hostages in Gaza is unacceptable and has no place in our country." The Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro took issue with Senator Rosen's comments and said, quote, "Maybe your party should have attended the speech of the Prime Minister of Israel then, rather than declaring their emotional support for people who have been doing this shit for months." And Elon Musk also weighed in saying, quote, "People who have been lifelong Democrats refuse to accept the clear reality that the Democratic Party is rapidly become openly anti-Semitic. This trend is accelerating, not slowing down. Knock, knock. Hello, Captain Obvious here."
Meanwhile, Politico had an interesting framing of the situation. Their headline read, quote, "Republicans pounce after Netanyahu protesters burn U.S. flags and wave Hamas ones instead." I laugh because conservatives call out time and time again how often when there's an issue where Democrats did something that is embarrassing to them, the headline is never "Democrats did something embarrassing to themselves." The headline is always "Republicans pounce." Republicans try to take it, using the language, it's often the word pounce, like, oh my God, how dare Republicans try to take advantage of a politically advantageous situation when the Democrats have embarrassed themselves. That's, you know, a media criticism thing, but it's just constant, and the media doesn't even realize they're doing it, even though they do it time and time again. Anyway, this was you know, an embarrassing spectacle at Union Station. I did head over there yesterday. By the time I got there, the crowds had largely dispersed. There were just a couple protesters left. I did see the graffiti. Yes, it said "Hamas is coming," very sinister language to deface public property with. Violence, there's no place for it. I think Kamala Harris was very, very smart to put out that statement condemning violent protests and then condemning the rhetoric on display, but, you know, while being perfectly clear that absolutely people have the right to engage in peaceful protest on behalf of Palestine or any other cause. They have the right to utter pro-Hamas statements if they want. They should not spray paint them on public property, but they have a First Amendment right to engage in protest, sure.
What is embarrassing is the U.S. Congress, not all of them, of course we know about half of the Democratic caucus did not show up, but what is embarrassing is the U.S. Congress giving standing ovations to someone who is about to have an arrest warrant issued by the ICJ, someone who has directed their military to establish extermination zones, who's responsible for the killing of 186,000 people in Gaza, someone who is a perpetrator of genocide. That's embarrassing to be in a country where our representatives are standing and applauding him and invited him here to speak. So I think that it's good these protests were happening, and there's a lot of viral footage of someone who was said to be in a Hamas getup. And if you talk to her, which a lot of protesters do, she will tell you that the reason she wears this is to demonstrate that Hamas has been labeled a terrorist organization, and while there are many people who believe very terrible things, Palestine does not have a military, and she says she wears this to demonstrate that the Palestinian people have a right under international law to defend themselves against an occupation. And just like you have members of the Ukrainian military defending themselves against Russia who do have Nazi ideologies. I have friends who have gone to Ukraine to deliver humanitarian aid to cancer patients who cannot receive it. They say that some of the people defending Ukraine right now are very openly members of Nazi factions within Ukraine. And so
I
this
wouldn't send
idea,
any money to them if I was in charge.
Yeah, so you can say, I support the Palestinian resistance without being a supporter of Hamas. But to label all of these people anti-Semitic and all of these people Hamas is just not reality. They're protesting a genocide.
Well, maybe they're not all for Hamas, but although I would, again, polls of people in Palestine show widespread support for violent resistance against Israel. I think whether they have the right to do it or not is a little bit beside the point. They did do it, and now they're being blown apart and destroyed in response. They provoked a confrontation with a much more powerful nation, and not only provoked a confrontation, but they didn't just fight military targets. They kidnapped people, they murdered civilians in their homes, they killed people at a concert, and now Israel has responded. Do I support the response? No. Do I think the U.S. should be involved? No. Do I think Benjamin Netanyahu is a good faith actor or should be the leader of Israel? No. And in fact, many people in Israel, even who support the effort, the war effort, don't think he's the right person to be in charge anymore. But my point is that the actions by the protesters who have the right, we're not talking about their right, they have absolutely legal right to burn the American flag. That is a highly litigated before the Supreme Court issue that they can absolutely do it, and I support their right to do it as much as I condemn them morally for doing it. I don't think, if you want to call attention to what Israel has done that is wrong or what is bad about Netanyahu, I don't know why you would engage in this form of protest, threatening us with a Hamas is coming language, defacing our public property. It makes people more, this is the whole problem with protesters who, especially the ones who do these kinds of things, is that people hate their guts because this is awful, and it makes their cause totally and wholly unsympathetic. It will turn people away from the legitimate cause of sympathy for the Palestinian people who are absolutely victims in this ongoing horror. They are afflicted, the Palestinian people, with a group of advocates on their behalf who are, it's almost like they're determined to sabotage any kind of effort at peace, any kind of thing of that, because nobody wants to be associated with burning of the American flag, defacing of public property, violence. I saw them, they dragged a cop for a little bit, and then saying embrace of Hamas messaging. It's alienating.
So let me get this right. Because they have spray painted public property, one protester has, that makes you not have sympathy for the protest of 186,000 people in Gaza being killed by the Israeli military? That's how that works for you?
I'm not talking about myself. I'm talking about how the American people will feel.
But you said what you care about in this protest is that they spray painted public property. And you said that makes their movement something you can't sympathize with.
No, I didn't say.
Or you're speaking for other people when you say that? Which people said that?
I'm thinking from a PR and comm standpoint that this is going to make their cause be less sympathetic to people, that they are afflicted with activists who seem crazy and ridiculous and can't be negotiated. Their point is that Hamas is coming for us next. Well, then, okay, then I guess we should back the people that are fighting Hamas.
But the whole protest isn't about what one person spray painted. And I think it's ridiculous, and I don't think anyone is equating every protester for the pro-Palestine movement as people who believe Hamas should come to the United States. What they want is for the Israeli army to stop killing them and taking their land, something they've been doing since 1948, since the Nakba. And so this is something that's been going on for a very long time. Pro-Palestine protests have been going on for a very long time. Globally, there is a movement that is pro-Palestine. This is much more than one person in Washington, D.C. spray painting Hamas is coming. And I think this is one of the biggest problems with the political discourse in the United States, is that instead of grappling with reality, which is that the United States is falling on the global stage because of their support for Israel, we are violating our own policies and laws. The Conventional Arms Transfer Treaty says we cannot give weapons to human rights violators, and we've done that. So we're violating our own morals, laws, principles, and values by supporting Israel at this point. And to make this just about protesters were spray painting, when I saw videos of cops running at protesters and hitting them with batons. So if we were to put another country in this position, let's say there were people protesting, I don't know, in another country like Taiwan about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And they were saying, we support the Ukrainian resistance. And we saw, militarized police beating up those protesters. We would be saying, this is so undemocratic. How could they do this to free thinkers who are fighting for democracy? But because it's our good guys and their bad guys, we view it differently. And I think that's fundamentally the problem with the commentary around this, is we're so willing to say that because we support Israel, Hamas must be evil.
I think the conservative response to that would just be, well, we support our allies and don't support our enemies. And Israel is our ally, and Taiwan is our ally, so we are on the side of our allies. I'm not even saying that's my perspective. I want to get us less involved in world affairs, and the arguments I end up having with leftists about this end up being kind of circular, because I agree and do not want to fund what Israel is doing. I think it is not our business and is not in our own national security interests. And if it were up to me, I would zero out the budget for funding of foreign wars, be it Israel, be it Ukraine, or anything else. I think that's what the American people want. I don't think they want their tax dollars spent on this kind of stuff. I don't think American involvement in the Middle East has made it a safer place or has benefited us in any way. I don't really want to take sides on a regional civil war between two groups of people who've been fighting each other since the dawn of time and have every intention of continuing it. They want to fight each other. So on some level, I'm like, well, then I'm not going to get in the way and not going to be involved in it. They want to fight, so they're going to fight. Taiwan and China, and I would say the same thing. Like, I am, of course, on the side of and sympathetic to people who seek freedom from Chinese oppression. But if they committed a bunch of terrorist acts against random Chinese civilians in some warped bid for freedom or greater autonomy, I would absolutely condemn that, not just morally, but I would say that's a stupid tactic because it's going to invite some brutal crackdown in response, like we're seeing with Israel and Gaza. Like, this was the entirely foreseeable consequence of Hamas starting a larger conflict with Israel, was that their own people, by the thousands, were going to get obliterated. And I think that's very, very, very sad. And for it, I principally blame the terrorist group that is unfortunately the governing authority of that region.
Well, that's the problem, is that if you're in a situation where you have an occupying force, Israel in this case, that will not let any weapons get into Palestine, will not let them create their own military. They have no way to defend themselves and defend their freedoms against Israel. And so, yes, fringe groups are going to come together and they're going to say, we have to fight this somehow.
It's the group that they put in charge.
They haven't held elections in very many years.
Right, because it's a terrorist authoritarian group. But they support, the polls show that they support
Exactly,
Hamas.
It's an authoritarian group. They support resistance to the occupation. And in this situation, they're fighting an oppressor. And so if that's all you have as a pathway to freedom, I'm sure some people will be like, thank God someone's fighting for us. Our children are being killed with snipers. Doctors have gone into Gaza, and they're addressing children who have been blown up.
Thank God Hamas fought on our behalf, as they're now being utterly destroyed by the thousands?
They were already losing their country. Israel has
had
this agenda for a very long time.
Things being not ideal, things being bad, to be Yes, things were not great for the people of Gaza and the Palestinians before this. The whole region has been destroyed
so what are they to do
in response.
If they can't fight back,
what do you mean? What are they going to do? Don't do terrorism. Don't do something that puts you in a worse. It's so easy to say don't do terrorism because
you're saying
even
what
if you
not
think
to do,
even if
what,
you're saying
what
it's
should
justified,
they do?
even if put aside whether it's justified, even if it was justified, it would be a bad idea because the end result has been them dying by the thousands.
So, yes, but what should they do to get freedom? Should the United States be supporting Israel in that response?
No.
Okay.
I agree. I don't want to support
so
it. We
what should the Palestinians do then?
The Israelis and the Palestinians and the Palestinians should continue to peacefully advocate for greater rights and recognition.
But what if
and
that
we should
doesn't
work
work?
toward.
That hasn't worked. That's been happening for many years. And now in the U.S., people are burning the flag and protesting
It not working
because
is
they
better
see
than,
the billions of dollars leaving the United States and going to support this. So they want to do something. These are our public dollars.
They are.
How should we ever
But
voice
based
this
on the
hurt?
thing they did, they're farther away from that, and a lot of them are dead. So the thing they did was not. I just want recognition that what they did was not a good idea. It's not a good idea for them, even if you think it's totally justified, because it's come to this point where they've been totally wiped out in a horrifying way, a horrible way.
Well, that's not dealing with what I'm talking about, but I'll deal with that. So let's say you're someone who's kidnapped and you're trying to escape. And that's all you can do is try and escape because you're kidnapped. In the same way that Gaza is occupied by the Israeli military. And you know what? You say, I'm going to make a break for it. You try and fight your assailant who's keeping you there. He ends up beating you up. You're worse off. Human beings have a natural inclination to want freedom and self-determination. So they're willing to try anything. Israel responding with a genocide and the United States supporting it is what these protesters are standing up against. They're burning the flag because they don't feel proud to live in a country that's complicit with this.
Well, I don't think we should be complicit in it either, but I don't think they're doing themselves any favors by engaging in such kinds of protest tactics, although they have the right to do it. I think it makes people less sympathetic to the Palestinians, but I could be wrong. I'm tremendously sympathetic to them, and I wish for an end to the occupation and for them to have their own state free of Israeli occupation and also free of Hamas, the terrorist organization that they did vote to put in charge of them. And there's never going to be peace between the Palestinians and the Israelis as long as Hamas is the organization running the thing. So I wish
and
we
as
could
long as
agree.
Netanyahu is in power.
Well, Netanyahu can face democratic accountability in his own country and is likely to. Hamas is not going to face democratic accountability because they're a tyranny.
Them from having elections.
Well, no, Hamas is preventing them from having elections. Hamas seized power and is maintaining it. Israel has offered an end to the struggle if Hamas surrenders and goes into exile, the top leadership, and which I fully support. And then they could have more moderate leadership and in full support of a two-state solution. But Hamas doesn't want that, and so we don't have it.
Hillary Clinton said in 2006 that when they hold elections in Palestine, we've got to make sure that people friendly to Israel and the United States win, and has essentially promised to use covert affairs to make sure that happens. So if you have the United States promising to rig your election, would you hold one? It seems unstrategic there.
I guess, no, but like if Hamas look, they're just not going to let on their border. Israel's not going to let. This is a reality. A terrorist organization run the territory next to them. I mean, do you want Hamas to be in control of Gaza? Do people on the left, are they for Hamas, an organization that does not allow its people to choose their leaders to be the people in charge of the
area? Or is it the United States and Israel? It's the United States and Israel. They are the reasons they have not had elections. It's the U.S. and Israel, and so it all used to be.
Why are we not?
That was
no. It's a hands-off. No. They've said the territory gets to govern itself. They're not in charge of it, and they picked Hamas, and they haven't been able to pick anyone since because Hamas is an authoritarian organization.
No, it's been an illegal occupation recognized by international bodies for very many years, over 40 years.
You're saying
now.
Israel and the U.S. is stopping Hamas from holding elections?
They're stopping elections from happening in Palestine. They can't even have their own army. They don't have their own country. They don't have a right to self-determination.
They stop elections from being held.
Yes, Robbie. And so what we're dealing with now is Israel, who has established a country on Palestinian land and territory. So to say that Hamas is a terrorist group on Israel's border is just not accurate. It's land that's been stolen and is occupied by Israel and has been since 1948. So sure, Palestine is on their border, but they put the border there because it exists on land that used to be shared by Jewish people and Arab people.
Land was,
and Israel established a military state on top of it.
We gotta live in the present. All land was somebody else's at some point, and you can make your peace with things that happened that were bad in the past and try to build toward a better future, or you can be obsessed with it forever to the point where all of your people get massacred. I know which thing I choose, but Hamas has a different attitude about it.
I think we're going to have to agree to disagree, but of course we'll always be following this. More rising after this.